everyone. Welcome to Agricultural Science with Mr. Jackson. Alright, so today we're going to be dealing with the cost analysis as it relates to what is expected in the CSEC syllabus for agricultural science students. Basically, we're going to cover two objectives. One, to tabulate a budget, and two, to analyze and compare the parameters of this budget. All right. So first we're going to be dealing with the complete budget, and this budget mirrors your actual income and expenditure statement, and it will have the same three parameters such as income, expenditure, surplus or loss. The complete budget is done so that you can approximate what your income, expenditure, and surplus will be if you were to take on this venture in reality. It is often recommended that you do a budget so that you can know what your profit and potential income would be like in reality. Let's look at the first parameter or aspect of the complete budget. Income. This is an example of a complete budget that will be done for a broiler project. It consists of sale of chickens, the average weight per bird, and the unit cost that you will approximate to sell these chickens at once they have been slaughtered. To calculate the total income, you must first know the amount of birds that will probably survive after the growing period has been finished. So you have 95 birds. Normally, a mortality rate of 10% is within the recommended threshold. So it is not recommended that you approximate that 100 birds will survive. So in this case, we approximated that 95 birds will survive the growing period. And we also approximated that the average weight per bird will be approximately 5 pounds. Also, our approximate figure for the unit cost that we will sell each bird per pound by would be $5.50. All right, so how do we come up with our total figure for income? All that is required, as you can see based on our formula, is to multiply the number of birds, which is 95, multiply that by the average weight, which is 5 pounds, and then multiply that by the unit cost, which is $5.50. And it should give you a total of $2,612.50 as the total cost. Ensure that all factors have their correct unit of measurements. For example, pounds or your dollar sign where you have your cost, and to put back your work in so that your teacher, and if your SBA is moderated, can be seen by those persons. Next, let's take a look at the expenditure section. All right, so the expenditure deals with all the items that you will be spending money on in terms of materials and equipment to ensure that this project can be carried out. The expenditure has quite a few items. You have the chickens, Vitalite, electricity, water, labor, slaughtering, and so on and so forth. The next section that comes under expenditure is the quantity for each of these items listed in the left side of the column. So you can see here that we would have been buying 100 chickens, Vitalite will be using 6 ounces. Labor, we approximate it to be 43 days. Slaughtering, 2 days, etc., etc. You would not see a quantity here for water and electricity simply because we do not have a separate meter, or there might not be a separate meter where you can accurately account for how much units were used, but an approximation within range can be used. In case, I want to point out here that as you can see with Vitalite, only 6 ounces from the entire pack was used. So therefore, you account for how much was used and not the entire pack. Okay? If you did use the entire pack, then you account for that in the total. But if you did not use the entire pack and you only use 6 ounces like we approximated here, then you calculate accordingly. What is important here for the expenditure section of the SBA as it relates to your cost analysis is that you do your calculations correctly. And total is achieved by multiplying the quantity and the unit cost. So the quantity by the unit cost. So for example, labor is 43 days multiplied by 7, which should give you a total of 301, as you can correctly see there. The total projected expenditure is calculated by calculating all of the figures in the total column. So after you would have calculated for each material or equipment, you then go to that column that has all the final figures and you add them together to give you a total expenditure. So our total expenditure here is $1,470.50. Ensure that you calculate all your figures, or double check all your figures, because this is a place where students, this is an area where students often make mistakes. And finally, the last section or the last parameter in your budget is the projected profit or loss for this particular project. Now, it is often recommended that you do not budget for a loss. There is no rational reason to budget for a loss and then go into that business thinking that you're going to make a profit, right? So if you, after calculating, you come up with a loss, then you need to re-estimate your figures or probably not engage in that particular business at all. Now, profit or surplus is calculated by the total income subtracting the total expenditure. So our total income was $2,612.50, and our total expenditure was $1,470.50. So in order to calculate our projected profit, we have income minus expenditure, which gives us $1,142. Right? So that's basically how you tabulate your completed budget. All right. Now let's take a look at the actual income and expenditure statement. All right. As you can see, the actual income and expenditure statement will be very similar to the complete budget as it relates to the parameters that we'll be looking at: income, expenditure, and profit or surplus. All right, and the same thing is applied here. So let's go through this very quickly. The sale of chickens, as in the number of chickens that are alive, or the mortality rate, here was about 8%. Right, so we have 92 birds remaining alive. Then we multiply that by the average weight per bird, and then we multiply that by the unit cost per bird. All right, as you can see in our working, you have number of birds multiplied by the weight multiplied by the unit cost. And remember to put back your units so that you can qualify what each number represents. All right, so for pounds you need to put back your LBS, and for unit cost you need to put back your $sign. Okay, so our total income, our total actual income, is $2,415. Now let's take a look at the expenditure section. Okay, I want to point out here that in order to have a fair comparison, the items listed in your complete budget must be the same items listed here in your actual income and expenditure statement. It would not be a fair comparison if you have items that are not the same, because then the comparison would not be fair. I stress here again to ensure that you calculate all your totals correctly. Double check and make sure that you have your totals correct, because this is an area where students often overlook. And again, to get your totals under expenditure, you simply multiply quantity by the unit cost. The actual budget would not be given to you, or should not be given to you, by your teacher already calculated. There might be a few things that might be left out, which he or she is assessing to see if you're able to do the calculations on your own. So for example, for slaughtering, we have 2 days, $15 per day, and a total of $30 when you calculate it, when you multiply 2 by 15. However, if there is a case where under the total section 30 is missing, you should know that 2 multiplied by 15 is what you need to do to get your answer. And in a case where you have, let's say, 15, the unit cost is missing. All right, so you will see 2 days, nothing on the unit cost, and 30. All right, all you need to do is to divide the total cost by 2, and you would know that 15 is the unit cost per day for slaughtering. All right, let's take a look at the actual surplus or loss, because there is a possibility that you can make a loss even after you would have budgeted for a profit when you do your project in reality. Hopefully that is not the case. Similarly, the actual surplus is calculated by the same formula: total income minus total expenditure. And here we have an actual surplus of $1,158.60. All right, so this brings us to the end of the income and expenditure statement and the complete budget section of your cost analysis. Now, let's take a look at how we are able to analyze the information and provide an accurate comparison. Now let's take a look at the comparisons. You are required to compare the projected and actual income, the projected and actual expenditure, and the projected and actual surplus for your SBA. Let's look at the projected and actual income, an example of how it should be done. The projected income of $2,612.50 is greater than the actual income, $2,415, by a difference of $197.50. This is as a result of two main factors. These factors are a large quantity of birds to be slaughtered and a greater selling price were projected in the complete budget when compared to the number of birds and the selling price of the actual income statement. Now let's look at the comparison of the projected and actual expenditure. The projected expenditure, $1,470.50, is greater than the actual expenditure, $1,256.40, by a difference of $214.10. The items that contributed mainly to the higher projected expenditure were the projected cost for both labor and sacks of broiler finisher. Now, let's look at a comparison between the projected and actual surplus. The projected surplus, $1,142, is greater than the actual surplus, $1,158.60, by a difference of $16.60. This occurred mainly due to the fact that the total projected income was considerably higher than that of the actual income. Furthermore, even though the total projected expenditure was greater than the actual expenditure, the projected surplus, when calculated, achieved a higher figure. At the end of this project, $1,142 was achieved as the surplus. Okay, so how did we come about deriving what should be said, or what should you write? How do we know what to write? Now let's look at how to analyze and accurately compare the different parameters. We know by now that each parameter, which was listed before, comprises of income, the expenditure, and the surplus. So let's take a look at the comparison between the complete budget income and the actual income. It is important to note that there are a few factors that influences the total income. 1, the number of birds. 2, the average weight of birds. And 3, the unit cost. To begin your analysis, you need to first look at which of these had a higher income. Was it the complete budget income, or was it the actual income? Clearly, we can see here highlighted in green that the complete budget had the higher income, $2,612.50. So therefore, this will allow us to have our opening statement, which should sound something like this. The complete budget, or the complete income, was greater than the actual income. And then we say, or we calculate, what is the difference for us to know by how much. Once we would have established what our opening statement would be, we then need to look at supporting details to be able to know what are the factors that contributed to our projected income being greater than our actual income. So let's first look at the number of birds. In this case, we are looking for which of the two had the higher number. So the number of birds in the complete budget is 95, while the number of birds in the actual income statement is 92. So therefore, the number of birds played a factor in the total projected income being greater than the actual income. Now let's look at the other factor, average weight per bird. Here you can see that the actual average weight per bird is greater than the projected weight per bird. Therefore, we do not use this factor as a supporting detail when we are doing our comparison. Next, let's look at the unit cost. The unit cost here is $5.50 for the complete budget, whereas the actual unit cost per bird is only $5. Therefore, the unit cost is the second factor that made a difference in the total projected income being greater than the actual income. Here you can see a checkbox highlighting which of the factors we spend time highlighting when we are doing our comparison. When this is done, we are able to accurately and systematically use the correct factors to explain and compare the reasons for the differences between the complete budget and the actual income and expenditure statement. We use this same concept for the other two factors as well, both for the expenditure and the surplus. Here in the expenditure section, labor and the cost for broiler finisher were the two main factors that stood out when comparing the items for both the projected expenditure and the actual expenditure. For this section, you are expected to look at 2 to 3 factors in your item section that has a considerable difference between the total cost when comparing both expenditures. Here again, we can see that the projected expenditure had a higher expenditure than the actual expenditure. So our opening statement should begin by saying the projected expenditure is greater than the actual expenditure, and by how much. And we already spoke about that when we spoke about the income section. Alright, now let's take a look at the factors that contribute to a difference in the surplus or profit. We apply the same concept. Let's determine which of the two has the highest profit. As you can see, the projected budget or the complete budget has a higher surplus than the actual surplus. So what were the factors that contributed to the projected surplus being greater than the actual surplus? Let's look at the factors. The factors here would be income and expenditure. Let's take a look at income. The income in the complete budget is $2,612.50, which is greater than the actual income, which is only $2,415. So this is one of the factors that you must speak of when you are comparing the projected and the actual surplus. Now let's look at the expenditure. Here, we are not looking for which number is higher. In this case, we are looking for which number is lower. The projected expenditure here is greater than the actual expenditure. Therefore, this is not a supporting detail to be used. The reason for this is if you spend more money, then it reduces your profit. Hence, a lower expenditure will increase, in the end, the amount of money that you make as your profit. So we do not use this in our comparison because this is not a supporting detail. So as before, you start out with your opening statement. And it should go something like this. The total projected surplus, and you state what the figure is greater than the actual surplus by a difference of, and you state your difference. Now let's look at the marking scheme. This section of the SBA is marked out of 10. However, it is recommended that teachers up the grade to 20 and then divide it by 2 to have a final mark. For each budget, a total of 6 marks can be obtained. 2 marks for each parameter. Therefore, at the end of your complete budget and the income and expenditure statement, you will have a total of 12 marks in all, pending that you would have done all your calculations and working correctly. Next, there is 8 marks for the comparison section of each. Next, there is 8 marks for comparing the projected budget against your income and expenditure statement correctly. In order to obtain full marks, the following must be done. 1. State the relevant factors that result in a particular outcome for each parameter. If only one factor, for example, only the unit cost is the only factor, you will still be given your 2 marks. However, if there are 2 factors or 3 factors, you must be able to make note of all 3. This should be done for all 3 parameters. If this is done, you are awarded 2 marks each. 2. Showing what is the calculated difference between all 3 parameters is expected. So, the income, the projected income is, and you state what it is. Let's say it's greater than the actual income. You need to say by how much. If this is done for all 3 parameters, then you get an additional mark. Thirdly, you are expected to state clearly if there was a profit, loss, or break-even outcome was achieved at the end of the project. If this is done, you get an additional 1 mark, which gives you a total of 8 marks at the end. Alright guys, that's all for today. Thank you, And remember to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. See you next time.